Picture yourself 5 years from now. Same morning routine. Same quiet negotiation with yourself about whether today will be different. Same scan of your circumstances to check whether anything has shifted overnight. Same silent conclusion that it hasn't. You'll make coffee. You'll scroll through other people's lives. You'll feel that familiar, low-grade sense that something is off, that you're watching your life rather than living it, that the years are stacking up and the thing you came here to experience still hasn't arrived. Now ask yourself, is that future inevitable? Or is it only inevitable because you've been treating your existence as something that happened to you rather than something happening through you? Neville taught something that most of his students initially resisted, not because it was complicated, because it was too close, too personal, too demanding. He didn't say you could improve your life. He didn't say the universe had a plan for you. He said you are the plan. You are the creative power. Not a participant in creation, the creator. The entire mechanism of reality is operating through your consciousness right now, this moment, building your physical experience with the same precision a machine executes code. And the reason your life looks the way it does is not bad luck, not bad timing, not bad circumstances. It's that you've been running the machine without knowing you're the one at the controls. Today, I'm going to show you the 5 stages Neville identified between living as an accidental bystander in your own life and operating as the deliberate creative authority you were designed to be, why most people stall permanently at stage 2, and mistake awareness for transformation, and what shifts irreversibly when you stop treating your presence here as a coincidence and start treating it as a commission. Neville's teaching rested on a premise that sounds simple until you realize what it actually demands of you. He said consciousness is the only cause, not one of many causes, the only cause. Your physical reality, every relationship, every bank balance, every opportunity, every closed door is an effect, a printout, a shadow cast by the state of consciousness you've been occupying. And if consciousness is the only cause, then you, the one who is conscious, are the only creative power operating in your world. This is where people nod and then completely fail to live accordingly. They hear, you create your reality, and they translate it into, I should visualize more, or I need to think positive thoughts. But Neville wasn't talking about adding a creative practice to your life. He was saying your life is the creative practice. Every moment you're conscious is a creative moment. Every assumption you hold is generating its physical equivalent. Every state you occupy is producing reality with mechanical faithfulness. You are not here learning to create. You are here already creating. And the only question is whether you're doing it on purpose or doing it by accident. Most people are doing it by accident, and they'll keep doing it by accident until they understand the stages between unconscious creation and deliberate authority. Because the shift doesn't happen in a single insight. It happens in a sequence, and each stage has its own trap that keeps people locked in place. The first stage is what Neville called sleeping, though he didn't mean physical sleep. He meant the state of operating through life without any awareness that you're generating it. This is where most of humanity lives. The person in the first stage experiences reality as something that happens to them. They wake up, and the world is already built. The economy, the relationships, the health, the limitations, and their job is to react to it, navigate it, survive it, maybe if they're lucky, enjoy parts of it, but always as a passenger, never as the driver. In the first stage, you don't question where your assumptions came from. You don't notice that you have a running inner monologue shaping every interaction before it happens. You don't recognize that the feeling you carry into each day, that subtle atmosphere of lack or anxiety or resignation, is an instruction being executed by something deeper than your conscious mind. You just live inside whatever state you were handed by your parents, your culture, your earliest experiences, and you call the results of that state my life, as if you had nothing to do with building it. Neville observed that first-stage living produces a specific quality of frustration. The person works hard, tries different strategies, changes external circumstances, new jobs, new cities, new relationships, and the same patterns follow them everywhere. Because they're changing the scenery, while the projectionist remains the same. The film hasn't changed. Only the screen has. And the same images keep appearing because the same consciousness keeps projecting them. The trap of the first stage is that it feels like reality. It feels like the world is solid, fixed, and independent of you. The evidence is overwhelming. You can touch it, measure it, bump into it. Other people confirm it. Institutions reinforce it. Every sense organ you have reports the same thing. This is real, this is fixed, and you are small inside it. Breaking out of this stage requires not a new belief, but a new suspicion, a crack in the wall of assumed objectivity that lets in the possibility that what you're looking at was built by what you've been feeling. The second stage is suspicion. This is where most people in the manifestation space live, and where most of them get permanently stuck. Something happens that doesn't fit the first stage model. A coincidence too precise to be coincidence. A desire that materialized after a period of focused imagination. A shift in circumstances that corresponded exactly with a shift in inner state. And the person begins to suspect that something is operating beneath the surface, that consciousness might actually be doing something. Neville welcomed suspicion. He said it was the first sign of awakening, the first crack in the wall. But he also warned that suspicion without commitment produces the most frustrated people on earth. Because the person in the second stage has just enough awareness to see the mechanism, but not enough conviction to operate it. They suspect imagination creates reality, so they try visualizing. They suspect assumptions harden into fact, so they try affirming. They suspect the feeling of the wish fulfilled is the trigger, so they try generating it during meditation. But the moment the physical world pushes back, the bank account doesn't change, the relationship doesn't shift, the opportunity doesn't appear. They collapse back into first stage thinking. They react to the physical evidence as if it's the cause rather than the effect. And the suspicion gets filed away as a nice idea that doesn't actually work. The trap of the second stage is dabbling. The person in this stage treats Neville's teaching as a technique to try rather than a law to obey. They visualize for 10 minutes, then spend 16 hours operating from the old state. They affirm abundance in the morning, then react to scarcity all afternoon. They occupy the wish fulfilled as a visitor, not a resident. And since the subconscious responds to the dominant state, the one carried with the most frequency and emotional weight, the 10 minutes of deliberate creation gets buried under a full day of habitual contradiction. Neville was direct with second stage students. He didn't comfort them. He told them the mechanism was working perfectly. It was producing a perfect reflection of their dominant state, which was the state of someone who suspects but doesn't commit. And the physical result of suspicion without commitment is a life that occasionally hints at magic, but never delivers it. Close calls, almost manifestations. Enough evidence to keep hoping, not enough to produce the life they're imagining. That's not a broken mechanism. That's a perfectly functioning mechanism reflecting ambivalence back to the person generating it. The third stage is recognition. This is where the shift begins, not in technique but in identity. The person in the third stage stops asking, "Does this work?" and starts understanding, "This is already working." They recognize that they've been manifesting their entire life. Every experience they've ever had was generated by the state of consciousness they were occupying at the time. The relationship that fell apart wasn't bad luck. It was the faithful execution of the assumptions they held about love. The financial ceiling they keep hitting isn't circumstantial. It's the precise boundary of what their subconscious has been instructed to produce. The opportunities that seem to arrive for other people but never for them aren't random. They're the absence that corresponds to an inner state of "not for me." Recognition isn't a pleasant experience. Neville never pretended it was. Because if you are the creative power, if your consciousness has been generating your reality this entire time, then everything you don't like about your life is something you created, not deliberately, not maliciously, but through unexamined assumptions, inherited beliefs, and habitual states you never chose but never questioned. Recognition means accepting that you've been the architect of the building you've been complaining about living in. And that's a confrontation most people would rather avoid. But Neville taught that this confrontation is the gateway, because the same principle that explains why your life looks the way it does also explains why it can look completely different. If consciousness built this reality, consciousness can build another, not by fighting the current one, not by analyzing it into submission, by occupying a different state, the state that would naturally produce the reality you choose, and persisting in that state until the subconscious accepts it as the new instruction. The trap of the third stage is guilt. The person who recognizes their creative power sometimes gets paralyzed by the implication. If I created this, then I'm responsible for the pain, the loss, the failure. Neville addressed this with surgical precision. He said the law operates whether you know about it or not. You were not consciously choosing those painful experiences. You were unconsciously generating them from states you didn't know you were occupying. Guilt is useless here. Recognition is useful. And the useful response to recognition is not to punish yourself for past creation, but to take authority over future creation. That's what the next stage demands. The fourth stage is occupation. This is where Neville's teaching moves from intellectual framework to lived discipline. Occupation means deliberately entering the state of the wish fulfilled and refusing to leave. Not visiting it during meditation. Not generating it for a few minutes before sleep. Living there. Making the feeling of already having what you desire your permanent inner address. Neville described states of consciousness as rooms in an infinite house. At any moment, you're standing in one of those rooms, and the room you're in, the state you're occupying, determines what reality gets built around you. Most people wander from room to room unconsciously, pushed by circumstances, pulled by reactions, drifting into whatever state the day's events generate. They wake up in the room of anxiety. Something good happens and they briefly visit the room of relief. Something bad happens and they're shoved into the room of despair. They have no stable address. They're homeless in their own consciousness, and the reality they produce reflects that instability. Chaotic, unpredictable, always subject to the last thing that happened to them. Occupation means choosing a room, the state that corresponds to your desired reality, and staying there regardless of what the physical world is currently showing you. This is the hardest thing Neville ever taught, not because the mechanism is complex, because the discipline required to hold a state that contradicts every piece of physical evidence surrounding you goes against every survival instinct you have. Your senses scream, "This is what's real." Your logic insists, "Look at the facts." Your history argues, "This is who you've always been." And you have to hold the new state steady against all of that. Not because you're in denial, but because you understand that the physical world you're looking at is the old printout. The delayed effect of old states and the new state you're occupying will produce a new printout if you persist. Neville gave his students a practice that sounds deceptively simple. Every night, as you drift into that drowsy state between waking and sleeping, construct a scene, short, vivid, first person, that could only be happening if your wish were already fulfilled. Not a scene of wanting it, a scene of having it, a conversation that takes place after it's already happened. A sensation that only exists in the reality where it's already done. Loop that scene as you fall asleep. Let it be the last impression on your consciousness before sleep takes over. And during the day, when the old state tries to reassert itself, when circumstances contradict your assumption, when fear floods back in, when the inner conversation starts running the old script, redirect. Return to the feeling of the scene. Return to the state, not with effort, with the quiet certainty of someone going home. The trap of the fourth stage is impatience. The person who begins occupying the new state often expects immediate physical results. And when the results don't appear on their timeline, they interpret the delay as failure and abandon the state. Neville was emphatic about this. The delay between occupying a new state and seeing its physical manifestation is not a malfunction. It's gestation. Seeds don't produce fruit the day they're planted. But the planting was real. The growth is happening beneath the surface. And if you dig up the seed to check whether it's working, you kill it. The bridge of incidents, the series of events connecting your current reality to your assumed reality, often includes events that look nothing like your manifestation. Sometimes the bridge looks like disruption. A job ends, a relationship shifts, a plan falls apart, and the person in stage 4 panics because the bridge doesn't match their expectation of how the manifestation should arrive. Neville warned against this reaction with everything he had. You don't get to choose the bridge. You chose the destination when you assumed the feeling of the wish fulfilled. The mechanism constructs the bridge, and the mechanism has access to connections, timing, and possibilities your conscious mind could never anticipate. Trust the bridge, even when, especially when, it doesn't look like what you expected. The 5th stage is authority. This is where Neville's teaching reaches its full demand. Authority is not a technique you perform, it's an identity you assume. The person operating from authority no longer asks whether imagination creates reality. They know it creates reality, the way they know gravity pulls objects downward, not as a belief they hold, but as a law they observe operating constantly, without exception, in every corner of their experience. Authority means you stop asking, "Will this work?" and start recognizing that it's already working. It's been working your whole life, every moment, every assumption, every state. It never stopped. It never took a break. It never malfunctioned. The life you're living right now is the mechanism working with absolute perfection, reflecting your dominant state back to you as physical fact. Authority is simply the recognition that you can choose the state, that the choosing is your birthright, that you are, and have always been, the one running the machine. Neville pushed his students toward authority because he understood what happens without it. Without authority, you're perpetually asking permission. Permission from circumstances. Permission from other people. Permission from the physical evidence. You check the world to see if your assumption is allowed. And the world, which is just a mirror, shows you whatever you were already assuming. So you see lack, and you assume lack is the truth, and the mirror faithfully reflects more lack. And you take that reflection as further confirmation. It's a closed loop. And the only way to break it is to stop consulting the mirror and start instructing it. This is what Neville meant when he said, "You are the operant power," not a power. The power, the single creative force in your reality. There is no secondary cause, no external agent making decisions about your life, no universe weighing your worthiness, no cosmic timing separate from the timing of your own state shifts. When you occupy a state, the mechanism builds its physical equivalent. When you persist, the building completes. When you waver, the building stalls. Every variable in the equation is you. Think about what this actually means for how you move through a single day. That inner conversation you had this morning, the one where you assessed your problems, predicted the same outcomes, agreed that certain things are just how they are, that wasn't observation. That was instruction. You were telling the mechanism what to build, and it heard you. It always hears you. Not your words, your state, the feeling underneath the words, the atmosphere of your inner life. That's the blueprint. And the mechanism is constructing from that blueprint right now, tonight, as you fall asleep. You are not here by accident. Neville was insistent about this. Your consciousness, your specific individual awareness, is not a random occurrence in an indifferent universe. It is a creative instrument placed inside a reality that responds to it with absolute precision. Every experience you have is a product of that instrument operating. And the only tragedy Neville recognized was the tragedy of someone who possesses the instrument and never learns to play it, who spends an entire lifetime generating reality by default, from inherited states, absorbed assumptions, and unexamined fears, and never once steps into the authority of choosing what to create. Acting like you're not here by accident means something specific and demanding. It means treating every moment of consciousness as consequential. It means recognizing that the inner conversation you're running while you drive, while you cook, while you scroll, while you lie awake at 3 in the morning, all of it is creative. All of it is instruction. All of it is producing harvest. There is no idle moment in consciousness. There is no neutral state. You are always in a state, and that state is always creating. It means you stop reacting to the physical world as though it has authority over you. The bank balance doesn't get to determine your state. The relationship status doesn't get to determine your assumption. The medical report doesn't get to overwrite your imagination, not because you deny these things exist, because you understand what they are, printouts of previous states, delayed reflections of old assumptions, and you refuse to let yesterday's printout dictate today's instruction to the mechanism. It means you take the moments before sleep as seriously as Neville did. He practiced this every single night, not as a technique he recommended to others while privately skipping. As a discipline, he lived with the consistency of someone who understood what was at stake, because what you hold in consciousness as you cross from waking to sleeping sinks directly into the subconscious, the part of the mind that actually builds physical reality. Most people hand that window over to worry, resentment, or the blue glow of a screen feeding them someone else's reality. Neville handed it to a scene of the wish fulfilled, constructed in first person, saturated with the feeling of already having, looped with the calm repetition of someone who knows what they're planting. And it means you persist, not for days, not until you feel like it, not until the physical world confirms you're allowed to keep going. You persist because you understand the law. An assumption persisted in hardens into fact, not might, not sometimes. The assumption hardens into fact the way water hardens into ice when the temperature drops. Mechanically, inevitably, without consulting your opinion about whether it should. Your only job is to hold the temperature. The crystallization handles itself. Neville observed that people who reached the stage of authority shared a common quality. It wasn't confidence. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't even certainty in the way most people define it. It was quiet. A settled, unremarkable quality of already being what they chose to be. They didn't talk about manifestation anymore. They didn't analyze their beliefs. They didn't check for signs. They simply lived in their chosen state with the same naturalness you live in your current name. No effort, no hope, no doubt, just occupation. That naturalness, that absence of trying, was the signal Neville recognized as the tipping point. When the desired state feels as ordinary as your current one, the subconscious accepts it without resistance. And acceptance is all the subconscious needs to begin building. The delay between acceptance and physical manifestation is gestation, not uncertainty. And the person operating from authority doesn't check for sprouts. They know what they planted. They know the law. And they go about their day with the unhurried calm of someone who has already arrived. You have been operating the most powerful creative mechanism in existence for your entire life. Not since you discovered Neville. Not since you started meditating. Since the moment you became conscious. Every state you've ever occupied has produced its physical equivalent. Every inner conversation has planted its seed. Every assumption, chosen or inherited, examined or automatic, has hardened into the facts of your experience. That mechanism is not going to start working someday when you get the technique right. It has been working since day one. It is working right now. The only shift available to you, the only shift that has ever mattered, is the shift from operating that mechanism unconsciously to operating it with full authority. From creating by accident to creating by commission. From wandering through states like a sleepwalker to choosing your state like someone who understands what's at stake. From treating your imagination as a daydream to recognizing it as the architect's table where your reality is drafted before it's built. You are not here by accident. The consciousness reading these words is the creative power of your entire reality, not a piece of it, the whole thing. And the life you're living tomorrow is being shaped right now by the state you carry into tonight, by the scene you hold as you fall asleep, by the assumption you persist in when the physical world hasn't caught up yet. Neville spent 30 years saying the same thing in 1,000 different ways, not because he lacked depth, because one truth, fully understood, is the entire teaching. You are the operant power. Your consciousness generates your reality, and the only question that has ever mattered is whether you'll keep generating it in your sleep, or wake up and build what you came here to build. Now you know. Act like it.